I fear for new parents. Y'all kids got to be more loyal to your parents. Like, these are the only people in your corner. These are the people gonna ride for you. Pops will go out there and blow the whole stack, like, for you in a minute. Moms will go out there and cry, hoping that a person feel the pain she feel and release you from whatever hardship or difficulty you may have placed yourself in. The kids today, y'all playing the homie game. That's your homie, that's your rider, all these fancy names you got for this guy. If you were to get charged, you may have an influx of mail coming in because everybody miss you in the moment. But give it a couple months, life goes on. And this is consistently always the case. You're gonna call your parents because you know they were always loyal to your best interest, but you abandon it to forge loyalty with people who don't even know what loyalty is.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to another episode of Raising Humans. Today we have a wonderful brother called Brother Amir. Some of you may already know him, some of you may not. Assalamu alaikum Amir, welcome to the show.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's amazing to have you here. I know we've been trying for a while.
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
And alhamdulillah, we're here now. I wanted to get straight into it because there's so much that I want to take from you, inshallah. So before we get into the lessons, I think it's important for everyone to understand your story.
Yeah.
So could you take us through your journey for those that may not know what you've been through?
In my background, I was born and raised in New York, raised in Harlem, in the streets of Harlem. And I had a very unique life, growing up. My grandparents raised me. My parents, they chose a life in the streets, opposed to the responsibility of raising me. But I was fortunate to be able to find, structure through my grandparents. So I had a very loving, caring grandmother, nurturing grandmother. Then I had a very firm, yet flexible, but at the same time, some, remnants of militant, type of grandfather. He was a Renaissance man, though. He was a very well-known character in America, Spine New York. And they instilled a lot of things in me that helped me and shaped me to be, a very well-balanced person. Now, coming up in the streets, definitely endured a whole lot of life lessons. And I think what was more prevalent in that time is that many of the youth, in general, we were all trying to find an escape from, the harsh realities of living in the inner cities of America. And I say that generally, not just New York. Every state in New York, every ghetto in the planet, they all try to find, a significant out. So growing up was very limited. It was either, you was going to play sports, you was going to, have a complete, academic, career, or the alternative was always the streets. And unfortunately, a lot of us chose the latter. And through that experience, some of us learned how to be entrepreneurs. Some of us learned to be the worst of people. Some of us learn, numerous different things can come from that. There's nothing that you can, single or classify as, one thing. But I think my escape became entertainment. I had a very extensive career in the music business. I traveled the world, I amassed, a lot of money, a lot of fame. And what I thought was an escape actually contributed to all of the hardship that had already reside coming out of the streets. It was just magnified. And I think that is kind of a rude awakening for a kid who genuinely is trying to, better themselves, change their lives, or, enter into a space where you can evolve or you can grow. And you come to find out that it's just a magnified, part of the reality that you're trying to escape. So I went through a period of ease and accomplishment because I had actually accomplished what I wanted. But then it started to be like this downside. You start to question yourself, like, how long am I going to be able to do this? Like, what's the end game? Because we know it's inevitable that everything goes up, comes down. And a lot of people in, sports and entertainment, they don't really hone in on this fact because, the ups are so good. It just seems like it's endless, But for me, I found myself slipping into kind of a state of depression, simultaneously having the best life, so to say, So the best life part is what everybody saw. The depression, no one saw, and the more that I, immersed myself in that lifestyle, the more depressed I started to become. So I started searching, but I didn't have no target. I just knew that I wanted something different. I knew I wanted some form of change. And in 2008, I found this blessed religion of Islam. And from that day, it was the last day like I smoked, the last day I drank, the last day I listened to music, the last thing I indulged in any of the repetitive, consistent, major sins that I committed on a regular basis in my past life. Islam gave me an instant, exit from that lifestyle. And from that day on, I've just been very adamant about sharing my experience, trying to educate some of the youth so they don't have to experience what I experienced. And then, also as a parent, simultaneously I have to take the same initiative even for my own. So it's became a full-time job to try to reverse, everything that I've contributed to in my past life and try every day to find new ways and better ways to continue to put back into, the world some type of remedy, by Allah's permission, alhamdulillah.
You said that there was a moment where you were doing things you shouldn't have been doing, like as a Muslim, like smoking, etc.
No, I wasn't a Muslim.
Oh, you wasn't a Muslim?
No, this is prior to Islam.
Ah,
yeah,
okay.
I became.
So after that, but was there a specific? Because for most people, to stop that so quickly is so difficult. So was there like a moment that you can remember that something just hit your mind and you thought, okay, that's it. This is the path now. I'm going to change.
Well, the thing is, I've never to this day found words to explain what Allah did to my heart. I can give you tangible like evidence to like where I was standing, what the temperature was, like things like that.
Yeah.
Or you could kind of get a glimpse of, the atmosphere. But what happens internally in the heart, and I'm talking about genuinely. We're not talking about a change of thought or mindset. We're talking about a change of the heart. And once that happens, it's something that at that point, we have the free will to decide whether we take this blessing seriously or do we still straddle. I chose not to straddle. And the only thing that made it easy for me, because, some people, I can deal with people acknowledging that, like you said, man, Brother Amir, how did you just leave all of that? And I don't let it, feed any arrogance or pride. I just feel grateful when people acknowledge it. But at the same token, I have to remain mindful that, I still have to sustain it. What Allah gave me, and me making a conscious decision to embrace it and tread that path and remove myself from any inkling of reminder of what my life was before. That's a full-time job.
Was there ever any point where you nearly relapsed?
No. Alhamdulillah. I never, it's crazy. I may have had dreams sometime where I was actually like, oh, what's going on? Or I found myself like, I actually had a weird dream one time. I don't know if it's something I can repeat because it's kind of something. I guess it would be, best to leave it off. But the reality of it is, whenever the actual decision or choice to stay the course or deviate, I have so many reasons why it's easy for me to stay the course. One, I'm grateful for what Allah guided me to. Two, I hope to earn the Allah's mercy and pleasure in the hereafter. Three, I have lives that I'm entrusted with, family, responsibilities. So when you're at the helm of all of these responsibilities and decisions, you're not really allowed to make foolish or, senseless mistakes. You can make human mistakes, you know what I'm saying? Because that's normal. But you can't make foolish mistakes, And a foolish mistake would be me chasing my desire all these years later. I got gray hairs now. Like it wouldn't even, what I'm saying? It wouldn't even make sense to see me even entertain anything that I've done previously because I survived it. And a lot of people don't, and that's another thing that definitely keeps me, rooted is I always reflect and remember a lot of people who didn't make it, Alhamdulillah.
I'm very interested in the early stages of your journey. Could you tell me about your parents?
So yeah, my mother and father, they were legends in the streets. And around the 70s, it was a very, very unique time when, there was a heroin epidemic, and Black excellence was measured by how much wealth and fame and accolades you acquired through that drug trade and through, those organizations that dominated the streets during those era. And my parents were definitely at the helm of it all. So because they made those choices, I was always aligned with it, and it was always kind of evident that one day, this information, this knowledge would trickle down to me, and I would eventually be put in a situation where I would have to make a choice. Now, although my grandparents provided a life for me that I didn't have to indulge in anything in the streets, I wanted to, It wasn't a necessity, and a lot of people don't really own up to that, But for me, I didn't have to, I got just what a kid was supposed to get, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes more, but never less, you know what I'm saying? But I always got what a kid was supposed to. And I mean that by saying, birthdays, before Islam, my birthday was always in point. Gifts was always present. Holidays, whatever the case may be, I was a kid that never had to be without, Now, of course, we want more. And as you get older, you start looking for the opportunities to get more. And it goes back to what I was saying before about those three demographics. Is either you're going to be in sports, entertainment, fastest way at the streets, So yeah, that was definitely something that was contributed to my life through my parents.
You speak about your grandparents very fondly, and you can see that your face lights up about it. Can you tell me, what kind of lessons did you derive from them that even to this day that you feel like it makes a part of your character?
SubhanAllah. I think the reason why you detect my happiness is not just because of the life that they provided for me, not just because of the lessons that they instilled in me. The fact that both of them, died upon Islam. My grandfather was 96 years old when he passed away, rahimahullah, and he accepted Islam before he passed. And my grandmother, when she passed away, she was 91 years old, and she accepted Islam before. So it's like, it's amazing how those decisions trump everything else. But because everything else was so good, I can't help but, light up just the thought of having these people in my life. So my grandfather, he was a sergeant in World War II. He was a military man. He was the first black captain in the Army Engineers. He was a gambling man. He used to, he was known for like, shooting craps and playing, blackjack, poker. So that was kind of his vices. He was a gambler, but he was extremely responsible, loving, caring, would do anything for his family type of guy. And he was one of the flyest, guys in Harlem. You know what I'm saying? My grandfather, when it came to like style and swag, everybody knew Johnny Hawkins. Now my grandmother, she was a beautician for like over 50 years. She owned her own beauty salon, and her business was a pillar in the community. So it's like growing up, all the little girls, they mothers, they aunts, I've came and, crossed paths with all of them, via my grandmother's beauty salon. So it was something that, about their life choices, their, roles in the community, and the businesses and, vices or whatever they established. It kept me so rooted in my community and so connected to my community, is that I felt like I possessed some form of regal status growing up as a kid in Harlem. I had parents that was well known, respected, loved, and feared. Then I had my grandparents who were just like, the most, coolest, people to have in your life. It brought no blemishes or anything to have my grandparents. It was just like, they were just love. Now, on the other hand, my parents, some of the choices that they made could have been, somewhat detrimental. But for the most part, the way they handled themselves in the streets, it never affected me. It only lured me into the streets, because people respect and love them so much that it just trickled down to me. And it was just like I said, it was just a matter of time before, the crown was passed. And then, I started my journey following their path with all of the life lessons that came from my grandparents. So I had some balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you tell me some life lessons that you got from your grandmother, firstly?
My grandmother taught me how to love. You know what I'm saying? She was extremely patient. I never seen patience. I've read about, certain levels of patience as a Muslim that's, baffling, when it comes to the most virtuous generations of Muslims. But I can relate because of the level of patience that my grandmother had, you know what I'm saying? First and foremost with me. Because academically, I soared in school. I was extremely smart, but I had a lot of behavior issues. Because I think, the absence of my parents, it was a void that could never be filled, no matter how much love and nurturing I got from my grandparents, my grandmother in particular. It was just a void, and I didn't know how to express it. So, I would act out. But she taught me respect, and she was respectful sometimes to a fault. I think she actually, in some cases respected people who actually didn't deserve respect. And I always found that to be very, very complicated to process. It's like, I even found myself as a kid, like, rectifying some of those issues without her knowing, because of how it affected me. It's like, nah, he don't deserve that kind of respect. And I might do something crazy, like follow them somewhere off the grid and, stuff for the law. But yeah, she just was an amazing soul. She was just an amazing person. And it was very hard for me trying to live up to what was warranted for any kid that's raised by a parent like that. Like a parent like that deserves no disappointment. So it was hard for me. But I think she understood that my behavior issues wasn't something that I was, fabricating. I was really struggling, But the balance was, look, I got straight A's. Like, I'm smart. I just have problems with people. I have problems with, you know, putting my emotions in check. I have problems with speaking and articulating how I'm feeling. So at that moment, you know, I can't close the wedge between when someone says something or do something that affect me. The wedge between that and my response, it used to be too it was too wide.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, if I don't fill this space right now with some words or some kind of comeback, then the next thing is just an action. You know, and she was patient with me. I mean, I got suspended, maybe kicked out of every school. I mean, she was there. She never turned on me. She never allowed, you know, any claims that were made, you know, about people who were entrusted with my education, telling her tales about her grandson. She couldn't, like, what? Not my grandson. I know you ain't, like, you know, and she was, and I'd be sitting there like, I'm dead wrong. Like, I know I'm dead wrong. I'm out of pocket. Like, everything this lady is saying is the truth. Everything this man said is the truth. And it's like, watching her just fight tooth and nail for me. It took me time to grow up and learn how to, you know, not just appreciate it, but start paying her back. You know what I'm saying? But I started to try harder. I started to try to be better, you know. And, you know, the only way I feel like I did accomplish that was having a successful career in the music business. And she was proud of me, you know. Alhamdulillah.
May Allah bless her and preserve her and grant her Jannatul Firdaus. She sounds like such an amazing.
Nah, she was. She was like, she was everybody's grandmother.
Yeah.
But I didn't like that.
Yeah.
You know, I wasn't cool with it.
You don't want to share her.
Even I did. But even though, you know, even though she never deprived anyone that came her way with that genuine, you know what I'm saying, just genuine respect and how she dealt with people, no one was void of it, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But in some cases, when I was having my little moments, when I just needed that for myself,
yeah.
Wallahi, akhi, I could not stomach her, you know, extending that to someone else. Yeah. Like, sometimes people used to come in her business and, you know, Miss Evelyn is how you address her. But if you start, hey, grandma, you know what I mean? I used to be furious. And and as soon as she say it, she would smile, and then she'll just look at me. Because she know, like, for real, she know I would really take it to a whole nother place, you know? Sometimes right on the spot, like, that's not your grandmother. And she like, what's wrong with you? It's not your grandson. Like, you know, it's like, that's not your grandmother. That's not your, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's start all over. You know what I'm saying? Like, go back outside. You come back in. Yeah, you say, Miss, yeah. I mean, well, it bothered me. And anybody in my neighborhood, they all know how I felt about everybody know how I felt about my grandmother. Like, everybody.
Man, your grandmother sounds like such an amazing person.
Man, she
I feel like calling her grandma as well now, but you might get angry.
Listen, I'm trying to tell you. See, as I got older, like I said, I had to learn that a lot of people in my community didn't have that. And the ones that did, they've been walking around, you know, existing in a dark place. You know, because that generation, her generation, they were different, man. You know what I'm saying? They were different. So it wasn't just my grandmother. It was other guys' grandmothers. And they all had this unique quality that was consistent, you know. But my grandmother, because of, you know, who she was, you know, and the business that she had established is a very intimate business. You know, anytime you're dealing with, you know, healthcare, beauty care, like any of those things, that's very, very intimate business. Because, you know, I used to see, you know, women like in the community that, you know, always wanted to project the best version of themselves, but when their hair ain't done, they come in with a hat and they like real, you know, covert, try to slide in and get in the chair and get their hair done. And I might be coming from school, and they be looking like you better not say nothing. Like, that's all the hair you got? Like, I used to think your hair was all the way down here. You know, and you know, I never really paid attention to, you know, some of the beauty tricks that, you know, women used to
See, in that way, I feel like when you tell me these stories, you were saying how you weren't great with communication and people at the time, and your
Yeah.
grandmother seems like the opposite, where people
She
can
was, yeah.
speak to her, you can tell her your
Everybody
secrets.
could. Everybody could. I mean, now in my community, I didn't have no problems. But see, I always went to school outside my community. Because from very beginning, like first grade, I may have got suspended maybe 6 times. And the principal there, his name was Mr. Cunningham. He was very fearful of my mother. And like he was scared of, like my mother was wild. Like, you know what I'm saying? They say
Yeah.
every firstborn son is, kind of reflects the mother. So you notice like the oldest sons out of siblings, he's always the one the most attached to the mom. He was the mama boy first, and everybody else kind of like balance between mom, dad. So for me, having a mother who was tough as nails, you know what I'm saying, and she just had a certain type of characteristic that would have never made me like a mama's boy. My grandmother made me that. You know what I'm saying? My grandmother, like my love for her, that's where I got that mama boy mentality. But my mother was actually my sister. Like growing up, my mother was like my big sister, Yeah. But yeah, she definitely was a pillar of the community. And same thing with my grandfather. It's like all of the older guys that were like my mother's age and older, they all loved my grandfather. And they all looked at him as a father figure. You know what I'm saying? Because they were of age to look at him as a father. I'm younger, so it's like his grandfather. You know what I'm saying? But to them, they all looked at him as a father figure.
What lessons did you take from your grandfather?
He taught me everything. Because I mean, like in Harlem, because of the lifestyle in Harlem, he taught me like when I was going to Catholic school, like second, third grade. All the kids used to have a little clip-on tie. I was tying Windsor knots and all of that. Like he taught me how to tie a tie. He taught me how to, with cologne. He taught me how to shoot craps. He taught me any and everything that would be applicable to the streets whenever that opportunity came. Whether I chose it or I didn't choose it, I was prepared. You know what I'm saying? And he always, like when I used to talk, it's crazy because I got older, I kind of developed a certain kind of shyness. But before, I used to stare at people and it used to be uncomfortable talking because he would always make me do that. Like I used to, like, you talking, I like, look at me when I'm talking to you. So it got to the point where this is a man that, I respect, I love, and I fear disappointing. I didn't fear him in the sense he was abusive or anything like, because he wasn't. He could just talk to me and just destroy me, break me down. Like, I mean, the way he dealt with me, is why even myself, I picked up some of those characteristics where I can project things vocally and get my point across and never have to go any further than that. So he instilled that in me, just a certain kind of seriousness. When things are serious, it's serious. I don't mind you playing. It's a time to play. He's always like, it's a time to play, it's a time to be serious, Right now, it's a time to be serious. So when I talk to you, look at me when I'm talking to you, and I just be like, man, this is pressure. I don't get none of this pressure in the street. Like in the street, it's like, I'm like a prince, I come in this house with this man, it's his house. He let it be known it's his house. He let it known that, he runs this show. But at the same token, he'll give you anything in the world in his possession. So it wasn't something that made me bitter, because sometimes, and you know this as well, like parenting is a serious balancing act. You have to be able to, be a father and be a friend. You know what I'm saying? Because the authority that comes with being a father, that's a given. You don't really have to work too hard at that. It's already a given. The work comes in with trying to balance it out with being a friend, being the person that you'll come talk to first if something goes wrong. And that's how my grandfather was. I never had a problem talking to him about anything. Same thing with my grandmother. I had no problems talking to her about anything. But if I knew it was something that she'll worry, I won't tell her, So, but for him, I learned everything. I learned how to be a man. You know what I'm saying? I learned how to be respectful. I learned how to give respect, and until I received respect. And because he was a man of respect, and that really resonated with me. I wasn't disrespectful to older people in the community. I wasn't that type of person. And it came from them. It came from them teaching me how to be a man, and I'll be forever grateful, and I wouldn't change. I'm telling you, some people wish they can change. So I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change anything.
Because it's made you who you are today.
Made me that and more, because everything they taught me was a perfect springboard for me to, learn how to implement, the tenets of Islam. Things that come with Islam, it came easy because of how I was taught from my grandparents and from the street. Because a lot of people, what they have this misconception about is when you look at the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, their belief system was one. Their love and reverence for Allah and His Messenger was one. But they all had different characters, It wasn't like this bland consistency where every one of them was just like the same person, So all of the things that I learned that make up my character, Islam only improved it, but I'm still who I am. I can still share a conversation or be relevant in any conversation if it's not something that, is disobedient to Allah, or something that, we all fall short sometimes. May Allah make us better. But sometimes you might find yourself entertaining something that's like, okay, it's enough. We done laughed about that too much now. You look at the clock, it's like, okay, this is about 20 minutes of that. Like, enough of that. You know what I mean? But because of my upbringing and all the things I've experienced through the course of my life, being in so many different circles of life, whether it's the streets, whether it's the music business, Islam, being incarcerated, all kinds of things that I've experienced have made me very rounded. But Islam becomes the barometer set on how to take what's beneficial from those experiences and implement them accordingly to Islam, and leave off all the things that's in opposition of Islam. You know what I'm saying? And like I said, the foundation of what I had established in my life through my grandparents, and even from, some of the actions of my parents, it definitely shaped me to be a little bit more prepared for some of the challenges that come with, implementing Islam to the best of your ability.
I wanted to say two things. I think that, firstly, and I'm sure you realize as well, is that being around a lot of kids, your story, it's just that you were so lucky to have all this love. Like, you had the love from your grandma, and you had the discipline and how to be a man from your grandfather, and those two unique different skill sets today made you who you are. Because sometimes you have a lot of one and none of the other, and you see a lot of students and see how their behavior becomes later on, or they become too loving and they don't know how to be a man, or they just know how to be a man and they can't empathize and have conversations with people. It's just it's amazing. But what really made me happy, because I was afraid to ask this question, was I was going to talk to you about about their Islam, because there's stories where people revert and then their parents or grandparents, they stay the same. The fact that they converted, it just makes me so happy. Where did that come from?
Well, I think that my grandma was a devout Christian. So all of us claim to be Christians only because of her faith. You know what I'm saying? I used to spend maybe almost 6 days a week in the church. You know what I'm saying? My attachment to my grandmother made, Christianity easy for me. It wasn't at the forefront of all my dealings, because I looked at her, she was the embodiment of that faith. You know what I'm saying? Everyone else to me was just hypocrites, and they were just, operating, part-time. But that woman was the embodiment of what she believed, and I immersed myself in her world. Meaning, I was in the Cub Scouts. I played the bells, you know what I'm saying? I played the piano. I was in the boys choir of Harlem, Bible studies, like, it was a part of, my education, and it was never like I was there for the reasons that most parents intended. I was there because it was an extension of my grandmother. It was a part of her, you know what I'm saying? And it was a part of her that I was well aware of, but because I loved her so much and I appreciated so much, I wanted to have whatever I can, whatever I can extract from her, you know what I'm saying? I'm open to it. Had it been some other motivation, I would have never did it. I would have never been that involved, you know what I'm saying? But because it was her, you know, and that's where we've always had, I believe, a unique bond that she appreciated, is that out of all her grandkids, you know what I'm saying, and even her kids, I was the one that was less apprehensive when it was asked of me to partake in any of these different church activities. I didn't have a problem with it. So fast forward, I become Muslim, and because of all the Bible studies and all of my involvement, it was easier for me to have a conversation with her based on the fact that she knew I know what that faith entails. So what I would do, I will always have conversations where we agreed and then end where we agree, because I knew if I just skipped the Isa, peace be upon him, these conversations would end abruptly. So you start from Ibrahim, you start with Musa alayhi salam, you start with certain exclusive statements, you know what I'm saying, that are consistent from the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran. Consistent statements of Tawheed, where she would always agree. Oh yeah, it's only God, and so on and so forth. And then sometimes I would challenge her, let me ask you a question, if Jesus isn't God, you know what I'm saying, and we have the ability to just call on God ourselves, why do people feel compelled to call on him as an interceder? Well, you could just call on God yourself, because that's what he did. Like, it'd be stuff like that. And then when it gets to the point where I feel like she may be giving me a little pushback, I just feel like, you know what? Nah, I understand. You're right. So it's like I always tried to, like, because that's my girl. You know what I'm saying? My grandmother was like everything to me, and I never had, any discomfort talking freely to her. So when I came home from prison, and, her cancer was starting to get, worse, so to say. But it's amazing because, I have footage from my documentary that I'm working on, looking at how much her skin glowed and everything when I came home. It's almost like Allah really preserved her. So me spending 9 years in prison away from her, was very, very hard for me, And I remember one time I called her and I asked her, I said, were you upset with me when I left home at 15? She said, I was. I said, but you know why I left, right? She said, yeah, I know. I said, the fact that I know it hurt you, I probably, if I had an opportunity, I wouldn't do it again. But I'm glad I did, because it made me, less dependent on you. Because she had a way of, enabling all of us, Even when she passed away, some of her, my aunts, her children, were belligerent, like just out of control. It's like, it's one thing that suffer from loss, but when that cry is like a dependency thing, and you look at your age, it's like, come on, I'm grateful to have this woman all these years. It's like I couldn't ask for nothing more. You know what I'm saying? And internally, I was a little bit more pleased than all of them because I know she had took Shahada, But it's like once that moment happened, I watched her health just quickly like decrease. And that's when I knew, you know. I started to talk to her even more. And, I was at her bedside. I got the videos crazy. I never really showed a lot of my relatives because I didn't want to upset none of them. But it's like I have tangible proof, that she took Shahada. And when they, the family, they wouldn't budge on her funeral arrangements. So I had a bunch of the brothers came and we, turned her casket towards the Qibla and we prayed over her and just walked out of it. So yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot to but even through all of that, like I'm still like I'm extremely pleased because it's like I might, by Allah's permission, inshallah, I'll see her again. I'll see her again. That's why I'm just so optimistic and so hopeful. Like I'ma see that woman again, and that means everything to me.
So now that you're a father now yourself, tell us a bit more about that side of you as Amr, the father.
Whew. It's a lot to unpack there because quite a few kids. But, my oldest is 34 years old. So I was very young when I had my first.
So it's my age.
Yeah. So the thing is, my first child was a girl. And my grandmother, she taught me to, respect women, to the best of my abilities, you know what I'm saying? Because a lot of things as a young man, you have to learn on your own. So despite the relationship I had with my daughter's mother, we managed to maintain a solid, allegiance, to raise her. But the thing that I would say is the most impactful is at that young age, I had to learn how to consider someone else. Every time I'm thinking, my whole thought process became selfless now. It's not selfish, but even though I was never really a selfish person, but you're talking about when you on your regular day-to-day operations as an individual, I have to be cognizant now that I got a little girl, and now the responsibilities of getting Pampers and milk and making sure she's all right and all of these things, it starts to rack your brain. It starts to, weigh heavy on your heart, and it becomes a part of your process now, And I think at that age, I needed that. You know what I'm saying? I think that the birth of my daughter did probably more for me than any other, effort that was put forth to deter me from the streets and deter me from the life in the streets. Even though I still remained in the streets, it was with more purpose now. Like I'm not just here because I'm here. I'm here because I got a goal now. So my first was like my friend. She was like my best friend. All the way up to her graduating, going to college and everything. It was just always, we had this relationship where, I was her father, but it was like she was raising me as I was trying to raise her, And I don't think she knew it growing up, but she was. She was grooming me to be much more aware of my speech, my actions, circumstances I may put myself in, limitations on what risks I might take, because I got to get back to her. I got to get back to, the reality of she's going to need me, especially in the community and the environment I lived in. Women are prey. Like if they don't got a father who's like a known killer or like somebody who's about that life, whatever girls fall under his umbrella are at risk. You know what I'm saying? So the men had to be men. You know what I'm saying? And it doesn't necessarily mean whether you have the ability to impose any type of aggression. It's about knowing how to apply the aggression. It's not always a senseless thing, because the reality of it is everybody feel the same way about their children. So you can't go hurt another person, you know what I'm saying, just because it's about yours. Sometimes you got to kind of, mediate, and that was the growth. The growth is understanding that, you know what, all right, they kids, man. They were just playing, but just next time, man, watch your son, man. Watch, you take that course. Even though your heart is saying, like, everybody, I need everybody to be horizontal when I'm done. Only one should be standing is me and my daughter. Everybody should be on their back pockets, That's the initial mindset. But as you grow, you like, you're aware. But, and she was amazing. She's smart. Still is, and she excelled tremendously in school. And it made me extremely proud. All her accomplishments, what I'm saying, vicariously, it affected me to where I was very boastful. Everybody know how I felt about her. Same way like my grandmother. And she was a reflection of my grandmother was really tight. So she was like a little old lady. Like, yeah. She would be on the phone for hours with my grandmother, and like very reclusive with her peers. But it is crazy because my 14-year-old daughter is exactly the same way. Even though she didn't have a very lengthy relationship with my grandmother, but she still has some of that in her where she functions better in the room with older women. Her peers, it'll take her time to warm up like an old classical muscle car. You gotta let it run for a minute, let the engine get warm, and then eventually, But yeah,
That must have made you so happy if you see your daughter on the phone to your grandma.
Yeah.
It must make you feel so happy.
Yeah. And the thing is, I recommended it. Like, get it from where I got it from. You know what I'm saying? And alhamdulillah, the same thing that applies to Islam. Like, don't take from me. Take from the scholars. Take from the people of knowledge. So the same thing with her. Like, she ran into a fork. Like, look, I'm not a girl. I can't really tell you. But, your great grandmother, she'll help you out. Next thing I know, she's getting a whole like roadmap, blueprint, you know what I'm saying? And she's applying it, And it's funny, she used to always say things to me, like whenever I used to have those moments where I was kind of in doubt. There was about, interest in boys and stuff later. She was just like, you don't think you taught me well? And I used to be like, yeah, but I'm still a human being, I got faith, but I just, I know guys, I know how I was when I was young. I know how persuasive I could be. So, it used to be girls that had the same type of structure and surroundings that you had. And, being, young, charismatic and stuff like that, you can penetrate those things, so knowing that if you had the ability, some little dude out there could absolutely be like my nemesis, you know what I'm saying? Or my doppelganger, but she definitely applied everything that I taught her, everything that she learned herself, everything that my grandmother taught her. So she turned out to be, and then, all of my children that follow, they all great kids. They all have, made their own life choices. I've never forced or imposed any type of, suggestion or, any goals that I see fit for them. It's like you just want to be there. That's what goes back to that balancing act. It's like you want to be able to say, all right, look, this scenario right here, I've been through this 1,000 times. I can tell you ahead of time, save you the trouble. This gonna go bad. But this one right here, I mean, I can actually go through it with you and we can figure it out together, And when you try to be that balance, and then sometimes I'm very just upfront. Like, I don't think that's what's up, And they know at that point, like I'm not bending, I'm not folding, and it's like it's an end of discussion. We go back to something else. It's like, okay, so what we gonna eat? Like they know me. They know, like, okay,
it's done.
Yeah, Alhamdulillah.
When you said about they're going through a scenario where you've done it before and you know the best way to navigate it, do you find sometimes that they won't listen? Because for me, there's one quote which really stuck with me, that some lessons in life, they cannot be taught, they must be lived to be understood.
That's a fact. I mean, that's a fact. And the thing is, you want them to live, because I lived, and it was the best lesson. Experience was the best teacher for me. The stuff I learned, you'll never be able to get in books. Now you don't want it to be so burdensome that it alters, their confidence or things like that. So those are the things you're protecting. You're not protecting them from, the world in totality, because you can't. That's the thing about a parent. Like, people don't understand, especially like, and some people may take this offensively, but this settled kind of parenting that they call it. They got some type of term for it now, passive parenting or whatever the case may be, or being an enabler. When you're an enabler, what you do is you strip your child of confidence and all of the things that come with experience. It's like, even my wife sometimes, like, when my son, 2 years old, he's wild. At that age, they explorers. Everything is like, when he fall or anything, I notice her reaction. I got a hint real quick. Leave him alone. Let him get up. Just let him get up. You know what I'm saying? Because he sometimes he get dramatic, because that's the vibe that you have with your mom. Because mom is a nurturer. Mom's gonna kiss the boo-boo and all of that. But when he out and about with just me, it's like he fall, dust his legs off, and go right back to playing. But whenever she's present, his reaction is like, "Mommy, boo boo." I'm like, "You ain't got no boo boo. Come on, let's go. Stop saying that." And he, "Okay, daddy. Okay, I sorry." He do it. Yeah, he's funny. Yeah, he's the funniest guy ever. But those are the things that's also very gratifying to see. Because like, some of my older kids, I didn't have, steady relationships with the mothers. But co-parenting, or just us in our own individual ways, pouring into our child, by Allah's permission, it proved to be, to some degree, successful, But now, coming in Islam, and having, everything in place, where you have help now. You have two loving parents that's present. And this is what I was able to have, even though it wasn't from my parents. But I know the impact that it has to have both parents present, and to be able to see the consistency of that alliance. It's not contradicting. It's not like, because, children instinctively, they know how to manipulate between, so if y'all not on the same page, these are things you're gonna have to try to correct later, but if you're on the same page, it's like you get much better results, because he knows or she knows there's nowhere to go. You can't run there, you can't run there. The answer is the same, the results is the same. Deal with it, and that's why they have all these statistics about single parents and that imbalance that comes with one parent trying to wear two hats. Because the one that they wear the most, that's what the child sees. That's what they want. So when you try to switch that hat, it becomes a rebellious moment. It's like, I don't like that hat. Put the other hat back on. You know what I'm saying? I like that one better, But when you have someone who wears that hat consistently and someone that wears this hat consistently, you get a well-balanced, upbringing. You know what love is, what cultivation, nurturing, all of that is about. But then you also know what firmness, and
this is a theme I'm hearing from everyone's story, where consistency, when it comes to parenting, just consistency.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to new parents based on your experiences?
I mean, for new parents, I would definitely advise them to be aware of each other, you know, and how they see the future of, your child. Because if this goes unsaid, what happens is you'll find two people trying to make sense of actions, that have no clarity, or, statements that's alluding to something that I don't understand. What's the hikmah behind why you're trying to, woo, 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 but if you have two people who have a common goal, and this is consistent in Islam. That's the beauty of Islam. Everybody wants their child to be a hafiz in Quran. Everybody wants their kid, to learn their religion. They want them to be respectful. All of these things are a given. I think what new parents have to prepare for is that second set of parents that's outside in the world. And it depends on the environment you live in. Alhamdulillah, we're safe, by Allah's permission, to live in a country that's predominantly and definitely a Muslim country. It's governed by the Muslims, it's facilitated, all the affairs is facilitated by the Muslims. Islam is strong, it's a masajid every 5 kilometers or whatever. This is a Muslim country. So the safety and the ability for a parent to maintain, the installment of Islam and not have so much opposition, to challenge that, we're blessed. But for new parents in the West, subhanAllah, like me growing up, it was known what we needed to fear, what we needed to avoid. It was clear, Now it's like I fear for new parents, based on the environment. Because if you live in the West, and this is the reason why I made hijrah. I don't want to wrestle with, the LGBT initiative. I don't want to have my children wrestle with racism or classism. I don't want my children to have to look at the barometer set for success and feel like they failed if they don't achieve it. Because in the West, the barometer set for success is ridiculous. We was cool with a little beeper, a little chain about that thin. You was doing your thing, But now these kids looking at social media, they seeing kids younger than them who are utilizing social media to generate millions of dollars, and they buying their parents' homes, and this is a lot. That's a burden for a kid to just step outside of this, controlled environment. Not really so controlled, but this cultivating environment, and step into all of this chaos and try to make sense of that every time they come back home to this environment, So, I guess my advice would be, like I said, first you have to understand each other's goals and objectives for your child. And you have to constantly meet in the middle to figure out how to navigate through all of the things that's going to challenge that union, because that is the ultimate battle. And that battle will bring you closer together. That battle will give your children consistency, uninterrupted consistency. And it will also, by Allah's permission, enable you to raise a child who has morals, who has integrity, who has, emotional intelligence, all of the things that's needed, Because to be honest, like, I'm a tough one, and it's because it goes probably with a lot of the trauma and stuff that I endured, is that I know how cruel the world can be. I know how vicious people can be, And even though I'm in an environment that's, free from all that, I'm still fearful that if my child was to encounter any remnants of what I've experienced, even the slightest of it, I don't want them to be oblivious to understanding what that is, So even though we have the safety of, the environment we live in, I'm always very sympathetic and continuously supplicating for, a lot of the Muslims that live in places like France, the UK, the Netherlands, it's a lot of places like Sweden is turned up now. It's like all these places are starting to snowball into, environments where the Muslims that reside there are being challenged, and then you got that generational gap because you may have a strong front as far as the parents coming from their Muslim country, having this commonality that they share in regards to what they want their child to have, But the problem becomes, fathers spending 8 hours trying to seek provisions for the family. Mom, she's the pillar and foundation of the house. Children have to go out just as much, amount of time as the father, seeking education and, social, intelligence that comes with being young. And that becomes where that second set of parents reside. They out there waiting, So now, Baba, and your mom, they old school. They out the loop. They don't know none of the fancy slang, none of this. They don't own Instagram, Facebook. So it's like their job becomes extremely difficult for new Muslim parents, young or older, to balance between what you're trying to provide and what the world is offering on a regular basis, So, and I would just say in closing to that question, because it's a very, very, deep question. Stay in constant remembrance of Allah, constantly, because the supplication of the parent, for the child is something that is guaranteed to be answered. And I think that becomes the challenge for new parents, as they find themselves falling into all these alternative methods, even seeking counseling and things like, no, just keep supplicating to Allah. Ask Allah to protect and preserve your children, protect and preserve you, your husband, protect and preserve the environment that you create for them, for his sake, and all of that. The consistency in that is way more effective than finding yourself putting a Muslim child on Ritalin or something, like, whatever. It's like, it's just crazy what happens out there. But yeah, alhamdulillah, I would definitely say, maximize the goal and objective you have for your child and keep it fortified by way of, Quran and Sunnah. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. Brother Amir, I've loved learning about your journey, your story, and it's made me so happy learning about your grandmother, especially because it reminds me so much of my own. So these memories are just get so happy when you tell me these stories.
Yeah, it's a lot.
MashaAllah, about your grandfather, and just your journey. I just feel like I'm hoping that parents will hear this and gain some value, but also the younger generation can hear this and understand that this is where you were once. This is what they're aiming for, and they may be aiming for it in different ways, but ultimately they want wealth. But when the biggest part for me was you are there where everyone wishes to be one day, and behind the scenes you were still unhappy and depressed.
Yeah.
And the true success and happiness lies in following the path set for you by the Creator.
Yeah.
So, Brother Amir, I'm just so happy that you've come to share the story with us today.
Yeah, I think more importantly, just to expound, is that the youth today as well, they have lost their way, not just through the influences that's out there in the world. They're lost their way as far as having that loyalty to their parents. You understand? When I grew up, like I expressed, I didn't even like nobody calling my grandmother. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's loyalty. That's like, I'll do anything for her. You know what I'm saying? Anything for her. Now, what I'm struggling with as far as my behavior, she knows this is a genuine condition that I have. You know what I'm saying? But what makes it palatable is that my grades reflect my efforts, that I'm really, really trying, you know? But with this generation, these kids, and I want them to understand this, you know. I spent 9 years, you know, in federal prison. And what I've seen was just by the corruption of a broken prison system, mass incarceration, high recidivism rate where people get out and end up returning back to prison in months, sometimes weeks. I've been in one prison, the guy came back in less than a week. It's like, you know, all of these different Western countries are going to start incorporating that system. The more this influx of misguidance continues with the youth, and really with the Muslim youth being at the helm, because it's not really an epidemic or a detriment until the Muslims are affected. Once the Muslims are at the helm of crime and things like that, now people want to pay attention. But when this crime existed all this time, it was looked at as, you know, a business, something that's necessary in order to, you know, feed that sector of law enforcement, so on and so forth. But when the Muslims get involved, no, they know even in our worst state of misguidance, there's something at the core of all of us, you know what I'm saying, that exudes strength and all kinds of things that they don't want that to be coupled with, you know, this new, you know, found lifestyle or choice, you know. The kids today, like when I say loyalty, I'll give you a scenario. You know, you go out here following these knuckleheads, these guys you call your friends or whatever the case may be. Okay? Y'all playing the homie game. That's your homie, that's your rider, all these fancy names you got for this guy. Lo and behold, I tell you what's more common than rare is when you're faced with a situation where only you know what I'm saying, is held to account. That's when you'll see all your homies, all these people that's supposed to be, you know, riding with you or whatever case may be. You'll find that if you were to get charged, convicted, and sentenced, minimal, 2 years, 3 years. It's like the closest thing to being dead. You'll know who's going to show up at your funeral when you're buried alive. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what prison is. It's being buried alive. So now that you're buried alive, you may have an influx of mail coming in because everybody miss you in the moment. Give it a couple months. Life goes on. You know what I'm saying? After the free the homie campaign, that goes by. After they wash the free the homie shirt, you know what I'm saying, it shrink and the colors faded, no one's going to wear that shirt again. Like, all of that goes out the window. When you're looking at your commissary books, none of the homies put anything on it, you know. So what happens is, and this is consistently always the case, you're going to call your parents. And you know why you're going to call them? Because you know they were always loyal to your well-being, loyal to, you know, your best interest, loyal to your safety, your well-being, everything. But you abandon it to forge loyalty with people who don't even know what loyalty is. And by keeping your parents in the dark, when these situations happen, your parents look crazy trying to defend you and defend your honor. Like I told you before, everything they were saying about me was true. But watching my grandmother defend me to the end is because she was defending the best part of me. And that's what parents do naturally. I know Ahmed. He used to be in a duxi. He was this and that. You can't be talking about my same side. You know what I'm saying? They fight in the good side of you. They fight in the part that they know is still pure. They still see you pray. They still see you holding on to some remnants of Islam, but they know you out there going crazy. So now when the situation hits the fan, they're left defending a child they don't even know. And you share the same house. It's crazy. Walking past each other every day. Father, salam alaikum. Man, you know, I was school. I was Duxie. MashaAllah. He go back to reading the paper or watching soccer. Mom's is cooking. It's like that pattern, you end up spending probably 8 hours a month interacting. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You know? So it's a two-way thing, man. Parents, I don't want to put all the pressure on you, but you know what your job is. Stay consistent as far as your goals that you have prepared for your child. What's going to lead them to Jannah, because this is our responsibility. But y'all children, y'all have to stop leaving your parents in the blind. You have to stop leaving them out there defending who they think they know, and they don't know you anymore, you know? And that's where the real fallacy comes from. You have to have a certain sense of loyalty where it's like, look, nah, my mom and them ain't going to be pleased with that. Nah, I'm good. Count me out. I'm good. I'll see y'all tomorrow at the gym. We play ball tomorrow or something. Like, you ain't got to abandon your friends, because they going to need you. If you stay the course that your parents provided, they going to need you. They going to need to see and be able to reflect on what it looks like to see a kid who is obedient. You know what I mean? Because they going to reflect. And after a while, what's going to happen is two things. They either going to, see some crack in your armor and keep inviting you to haram, or they're going to stop inviting you altogether. They're going to start distancing themselves from you, because like, nah, man, you stop playing basketball right in the middle of the game to go over there and pray. You do, say it's just you're too religious. Alhamdulillah, that's your protection. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, y'all kids got to be more loyal to your parents. Like, these are the only people in your corner. These are people going to ride for you. Your pops will get, deported for you in a heartbeat. You know what I'm saying? Pops will go out there and blow the whole stack, like, for you in a minute. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Moms will go out there, and cry, real tears, hoping that a person feel the pain she feel and release you from whatever hardship or difficulty you may have placed yourself in. So, don't be disloyal to Allah. And don't be disloyal to Allah by being disloyal to your parents. It's very important.
Thank you so much, Brother Amir, for your wisdom today and sharing us your story. Inshallah, I know that my audience will benefit, and I pray that any good that's derived from this video, it's a form of sadaqah jariyah for you and your grandmother, your grandparents, and everyone that helped create you who you are today. Thank you so much for coming on, Brother Amir.
Man, listen, if there's anything that I said of any benefit, is solely from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if there's anything that I said that's incorrect or harmed anyone in any kind of way, I take full responsibility. It's from myself. It's from my lack of knowledge and, the whispers of the shaitan. Wa iyadu billah. I ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless you on this journey and continue to place barakah in all your efforts to extract goodness from the people, in regards to that which is, a reminder for yourself and for all those who are listening and all those that catch wind of this podcast. I believe that, Allah has ordained for us to sit across from each other and, try to benefit the people to the best of our ability. And I ask Allah, to make it heavy on our scales, forgive us for our sins, forgive us for our shortcomings, and make us from amongst those who are the inhabitants of his paradise, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah for the wonderful dua. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.